Ask AJ. So one of the things that in my early projects that I had to contend with was around data ownership. Who thought they owned the data, who really owned the data, and kind of some of the machinations you've got to go through in order to actually get your hands on it. What do we see with that when we're engaging with clients?
Again, it's a hurdle, but it's also not insurmountable. There's a couple of barriers that are involved. So again, you have lots of different data with lots of different owners. And so people sometimes can be territorial with their data. And so we run into a situation. I think you may have been on a couple of meetings with this particular client where we were trying to do machine assisted QA. How do you use labeled data and have a machine kind of help with the QA process? Well, guess what? One guy owned the QA forms. Another person owned the data set and the output of the QA forms. Somebody else owned the transcriptions of the calls. And then so I think there were a total of 6 different business owners with 6 different sets of data that all had to come together. And this is not uncommon in large companies. In smaller companies, it's almost the reverse problem where I own everything, but I don't have the time, the energy to really, do something with it. And so it's an interesting opportunity. One of the more fulfilling things in my job is that I get to allow our clients the opportunity to take data to create conversations with other people in their company. And so when we do a project, I present 2 to 3 times on average to different groups. So if somebody owns the website who doesn't own fulfillment, who doesn't own customer support, how does that person who owns customer support, how do they create meaningful conversations about the impact of decisions that are made in other parts of the business in the support channel? And that's really fulfilling for me because it helps me answer a question, but also creates this other added value for our client that they can go talk to other groups inside their organization.
So we get our hands on a client's set of data. In order for us to be able to do the work we need to do, we may be applying some machine learning. We may be doing a lot of different techniques. What are the things we have to do once we actually get our hands on the data that's in question?
So if it's a phone call, for example, you label the data, because in machine learning, for example, if you're trying to train a model, and this is way above my pay grade, but I've seen it work. There's 20 or 30 models, and they all run in the cloud environment, and they all look at the exact same data, but they look at it differently. And then you find the right model. Well, to get the right model, you have to have the right data labeled, and that way the machine can understand the associations between the different words, the associations between different actions and things like that. So it's creating these large calibrated sets of data that allow for the machine learning algorithms to then run, and then they can then interpret things in real time, provide solutions in real time, do comparative analysis in real time. But they go nowhere without these calibrated sets of data. And to your point, everybody wants to skip to Z. Oh, I want to do artificial intelligence. I know, but you have to understand everything that goes into that. And the dirty secret is these large calibrated sets of data. There's no reason why you type into a search engine stovepipe hat and Abraham Lincoln's picture pops up. There's no reasonable reason for that unless somebody at some point labeled those 2 pieces of information together as they're related. Yeah. And that's the basic example of, if you call in for support, I know, words that cause emotion. I know words that cause confusion. I know words that talk about what the problem is. And the easiest example of that is if the machine can hear you say, I need to reset my password, and the machine learning algorithm knows what that is, then up pops the answer for the agent without the agent having to do anything, just to listen and understand.
Yeah, I think that labeling, creating the right taxonomies is something that so many people underestimate the need for and the requirement for. One of the examples I like to use, the Stanford professor who was really one of the pioneers in machine vision, crowdsourced literally thousands of people to label images as cats before the technology could know what a cat was, right? But the algorithm has no idea what a cat is. You have to show it, and on top of it, a cat can be skinny, it can be fat, it can be orange, black, gray. And so I think people don't really recognize the importance of even in a structured data case doesn't mean your data is labeled in an effective way for it to be utilized by an algorithm necessarily. How many times, certainly and for the past several years, one of the fastest growing job markets in the United States, at least, has been in the data sciences, right? Data scientists are growing in number throughout organizations, through certain types of organizations. Not everybody perhaps has the resources to be able to take on a formal data scientist. But there are lots of things that I think organizations could do, even without a formal data program, to kind of help themselves be in a better position when they get to a stage where they want to use certain technologies to be able to analyze that data. What kind of things should companies be doing, perhaps who don't have formal data analytics, they don't have data scientists on staff, or the things that they could be doing now to try to prep themselves for that time when they will start trying to use some of these technologies?
So that's a great question. I'll talk about that a couple of different ways. So you use taxonomy. The academic term that we throw around here is ontology.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't take, I don't want to belittle somebody with a PhD. It doesn't take somebody with a PhD to effectively build ontology. It takes somebody of a really good understanding of the topic.
Yeah.
And then an understanding of how do you then capture that in the topic and the subtopic and the intent and all these other things. And if you can build out the right ontology, then you can train people to then label data. If you don't really need data science to get into taking advantage of outputs of data science. That's just somebody who's got strong Excel skills, and you get a group of people together that says, okay, what is the problem I want to solve? What are the data sources available? And then you kind of crowdsource it in a small way with just people that have a good understanding of the business, people that have a good understanding of just manipulating numbers. And it doesn't require science, it's just a lot of common sense. And just if you can identify the problem, the data probably exists already.
Yeah.
And then we augment that, with the human element, just, when we do our projects. But I always joke, data labeling has been going on since the beginning of time. There was probably a cave somewhere where one dinosaur was labeled, this one will eat you and this one won't. And in business, I've been in business for 30 years, and we've been using data sets and labeled data. We just never called it that.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll kind of sum up my long-winded answer to your question. It's kind of getting back to the basics of, what's the information that's available, and then just kind of trying to use that as a use case to solve a business problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read a study probably a year or more ago. You're going back to the skills of a data scientist. The truth of the matter is they're spending somewhere in the vicinity of 70% or more of their time just cleaning the data sets they have in the first place, right? So there's probably not as much analysis going on as there's just data manipulation because of what they're finding when they're going into these organizations in terms of data availability, data readiness,